Welcome to Loving God and Loving Life. We're in Acts chapter 14, where Paul and Barnabas are hailed as gods. Paul is killed and revived, and elders are ordained. I'm going to take a little different approach in this chapter. I'm going to give you a 30,000-foot view. Up till now, in the book of Acts, I've really kind of been hammering on one theme, that God is leading this parade. We're not going to praise the people as much as we praise the God who is shockingly active in the faces of these people. And my premise throughout is God is just as active today. He might be doing things a little bit different, but he's just as active today. And our faith and our excitement is we're following a great big God, not that we are so great. Well, here's an interesting thing. In verse 1 of chapter 14, Paul and Barnabas went notice these words, as usual, into the Jewish synagogues. This was their strategy. They went from place to place, and everywhere they went, there was a gathering spot called a synagogue. Now, interestingly enough, in these synagogues that were now in Gentile areas, this wasn't Israel, you understand, they were going into, when they went to these synagogues, it wasn't just Jewish people they found. In fact, we read in the 26th verse of the 13th chapter, I'll put it up there for you. Brothers, they're speaking, you sons of Abraham, and also you God-fearing Gentiles. So they're in a synagogue, and they're addressing the Jews, the sons of Abraham, those are the Jews, and the God-fearing Gentiles. Well, these synagogues had become gathering spots for not just Jewish people, but also, notice that phrase, God-fearing Gentiles. Anybody from the community who had a heart for God just showed up at the synagogue. Here's what is shocking about this little chain of events. Synagogues never existed until the Babylonian exile. When, the people of Israel sinned, you can read those stories in the Old Testament, and God took them and he gave them warnings and took them into captivity and into Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All those stories happened in Babylon. Well, here's my point here. It was during that captivity when Israel, really the nation of Israel kind of ceased to exist in Israel for a time there. And during those years, in order to maintain their identity in Babylon, they had to build what we would call local churches. So they started establishing synagogues, places where they could get together. Again, now they're out of Israel, so to maintain their identity, synagogues. Well, they kept doing that throughout the Gentile world, wherever they traveled, wherever they went. And even when they went back to Israel, there were no synagogues in Israel. When they went back to Israel after this time, after the Babylonian exile, they built synagogues in Israel. They didn't exist before 600 BC. So what is my point? Gang, my point is not only is God leading this parade in their face, God has been leading history. The whole thing has been a setup. We think of the Babylonian exile. Well, gosh, that's just the result of man's sin. There's nothing good in that. What good can come from man's sin? Okay, God used it all. He's setting the whole thing up. Without the Babylonian exile, there are no synagogues. There are no places where these God-fearing people gather. The strategy is not there. God was putting the chess pieces in place hundreds and hundreds of years earlier. Friends, the reason I have confidence when I pray for one is God has been on the scene, setting things up before I ever arrive, before other people arrive. I'm trusting a great big God who's been at work on the large scale for a long, long time. He's bigger than me. He's at work. I'm trusting him. Let's have that confidence in our God that he is setting things up. He's the one building his church. And if he's building his church, well, I'm glad to jump in. It doesn't all rest on me. It's his plan. That's why we pray this prayer every day. God, today. God, send me one person today to share your love with. Friends, I hope you never forget that doing God's will and loving God, it's the only way to love your life.